Welcome to the Spunky Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, psychic medium Carrie Muggs. This is where we learn all things spirit, everything from spiritual gifts, awakenings, ghosts, aliens, and starseeds. Nothing is untouchable, but always fun and spunky. I am honored to be on this spiritual journey with you, so make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Hello, Spunksters. How are you? This week has been crazy. I got a new grandbaby this week, so I'm going to keep this one. I'm supposed to keep this one kind of short, but sometimes I go a little long because I love to talk about this stuff. So, because it's summer and it's been crazy and I knew that there was a grandbaby coming, I'm only doing the podcast for every other week for right now, but as soon as September hits, we'll go back to the normal schedule of every week. It's been kind of a nice little break during the summertime. Things have been crazy. So got a brand new band baby. Brand new grandbaby. Things are good. Everything's awesome. So that will make 5 for me. 4 girls and 1 little boy. So it's been a fun week. So this week we're going to talk about things. I was doing a reading. I had rescheduled a reading. I was doing a reading yesterday, and there's some things that come through in readings quite often that I just kind of thought, well, this would be kind of cool to share with everybody. These things that come a lot that sometimes spirits will talk to me about. So this episode's going to be things that I've learned as a medium throughout all the readings that I've done. Spirits tend to come through and say these things a lot to me. Now, that doesn't mean, as always, I always want you to take this information that I give you with a grain of salt, right? Like, interpretation is everything. We can all read the same verse in the Bible and interpret it differently. So take what resonates with you and take that and leave what doesn't and have your own experience. This is the thing. I don't want you to live the law according to Carrie or the law according to anybody. I want you to have your own experience and see what you think about it. And if your gut kind of goes with it, then that's a good thing. If your gut doesn't go with it, that's a good thing too. Just kind of listen to your own tuition about this. But so most of the time when I do readings, there's lots of different things that come through that are pretty general that are always the same. And first one is babies. So a lot of times babies will come through that mostly miscarriages or abortions. And for one, the spirits are never mad. And I know that might upset some of you because you have a belief that and that's okay. That's your belief. But you know what? I've never, in my experience, had a spirit come through upset or mad at the person who had an abortion, because you have to remember, when they get to the other side, they see the whole picture. They see why. They see, everything that led up to that. They see all sides of every story, and they're at peace, and they're not the ones who are supposed to judge. They're not judgmental at all. All I've ever felt is love and understanding. And miscarriages, like, there's nobody's fault, nothing. A lot of times, too, miscarriages will tell me that it mostly has to do with the spirit maybe not being ready, or the spirit being kind of, a little bit nervous, or things like that, or something's not. Because you have to think, when we're born, everything has to be in place, like the timing, the astrology, the stars, everything has to be like. It's so crazy because it's so perfect that it's beautiful, but it's so perfect that sometimes you feel like it's impossible. But everything has to be in place for the higher good. So your soul contract, how the things that you wanted to do, it all kind of has to go. So if something goes out of place, then sometimes sometimes we have a miscarriage, and sometimes us as mothers take that on as us being our fault. and the grief is still very real. And that's the thing too. I don't ever want to make any of this lighthearted or spiritual bypassing, because miscarriages and abortions are very, very real, and they hold a lot of grief to them. So any of this information that I give you today, I don't want it to be like, oh, love and light, everything's good, because that's just kind of like ignoring it's all this stuff is still hard to process, and it's still, especially when you're the ones who've had these experiences and you're grieving. So it doesn't make it more lighthearted. It doesn't make it like, oh, don't worry about it. It just is, this is just what I've kind of been told. And honestly, we might not be able to understand it here on earth, but I know that one day when you go to the other side, you will understand it. That's what they keep telling me. So these miscarriages sometimes will tell me that they'll come back. They might come back. So if you've had like 2 or 3 miscarriages, it could be the same spirit trying to come back. It could be different spirits. It doesn't just kind of follow your gut. And also too, sometimes the baby spirits will say they're going to wait for their moms to come to the other side, and sometimes the spirits will say they're going to come through as a grandchild. So as long as they stay in the same soul family, it's all good. So it just depends on the spirit and what's in the soul contract and what you've I've actually, it's kind of cool. I've actually had an experience where my sitter has had the experience of losing a child and then feeling like her spirit and that she came back again. So you just never know. And the thing about it is you kind of look at it and think, we don't know, right? And there's no proof in the pudding. There's no proof that we can prove this or prove this. This is just what what I've been told by experience and my clients from experiences. So babies can, if you have had a miscarriage, sometimes depending on your contract with them, they can wait for you to get to the other side to see them, or sometimes they can come back through as another child or as a grandchild, because they always will be in your same soul family. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. Also too, speaking of babies, there's a lot of times spirits will come through and tell me that there's times on earth that their spirit can actually leave the body. And I thought this was interesting because a long time ago, I had heard an interview by a guy that had been being attacked by a tiger. And he said, we have a very graceful God, because as I was being attacked, my spirit jumped out of my body and I watched it from on the outside. And lots of spirits will tell me this happens to them. This happens to us a lot of times when there's trauma. Sometimes when we go through something pretty traumatic, our spirit we disassociate. So a lot of times this is why children can't remember childhood traumas, because we were maybe pulled or we disassociated. That's kind of a whole mental type of issue kind of thing, and I don't know where the proof is in that, but I just know it can happen. But spirits say all the time that their spirit was out of the body, or they watched it happen while the spirit came out of the body and they watched it happen from above. This usually happens right before a trauma, like right before an accident of some sort. So this way the spirit doesn't suffer, unless it was contracted in your soul contract to experience that, which I very rarely get those, but you never know. So, but most of the time, spirits will tell me that they leave the body before impact, so they didn't have the trauma. They didn't suffer the trauma. They didn't experience the trauma. And even there's other times too that they tell me that their spirit can leave the body. So there's 3 mostly, and that's when Alzheimer's or dementia has set in a lot. Like when it's like a lot of spirits will tell me when Alzheimer's and dementia in their body's just kind of like this battery or this thing that, because their body just keeps going. A lot of times when spirit leaves the body is when the body is malfunctioning or something's going on with the body, and the spirit can come in and out through the veil. Go in and out of the veil is what they say to me sometimes. But so during Alzheimer's, really, really set on dementia and Alzheimer's, a lot of times spirits will say, I was already going in and out of the body by that time. Spirits will go back and forth. Or they'll be like, I visited my husband who's already passed on, or I visited my child who's already passed on. I actually did have one experience where the mother came through, and my sitter was like, but my mother's not passed. She's got really bad dementia, really bad Alzheimer's, but everything that the spirit was telling me was connected to the mother. So, that's kind of hard to explain. I just know that sometimes that they can tell me that their spirit can go in and out of the veil or in and out of the body during those times when the body's kind of not working properly. Also, too, another time that the spirits can say that they do that is during comas, and I've had that experience too. I had a spirit come through before. He wasn't passed yet. He was in a coma in the hospital, but he came through. He did eventually pass, but those are kind of uncomfortable for me because I get nervous because what if, I don't want to. I think everything still has hope, but if the spirit's coming through, I still feel like there's hope that they can survive. So those are a little bit sticky situations during readings, but they have happened. Not very often. Out of all the readings I've had, that's like one or two times that's ever happened. So during comas, during Alzheimer's, and this one, I know people are going to be like, what? But this one, so again, during pregnancy, the baby is very much alive. The baby is connected and the spirit is connected. And but I also know that sometimes the spirit can come in and out of the body during pregnancy because the baby's in the early stages, because the baby's just kind of still the body's still cooking, still, being the battery, still getting. So I know that sometimes that spirits will come through and be like, sometimes spirits, like baby spirits, will come through and say that they're on their way or they're inside their mom or things like that. So now again, that is, you can take that for what it is, but that's just what I know. That's what I've experienced. And so those are the main times that spirits can actually leave the body before the body has actually passed or before the body has been declared deceased. And I do know that there was a guy that got in an accident with his family, and everybody passed except for him. But he wrote a book about how he got to stay in heaven with his family for like what seemed like a long time. And then the wife looked at him and said, you need to go back. And he realized he had only been in a coma for like a week. And he was the only survivor. And he knew that his baby girl had passed at the impact of the scene, but the baby girl's body didn't pass until 2 days after. He wanted to get it changed on the death certificate, but he couldn't because the body didn't pass, but he knew her spirit had passed. So that was kind of interesting because that was kind of validation to me. If I can ever find that book again, that was validation to me that what the spirits are saying is kind of actually true. And it's so crazy to me because it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful that, if we didn't want to experience those kinds of traumas, that we don't, and that there is a God, and there is, a graceful God, and gives us grace, and we choose before we come here sometimes, and that's hard too, because I say a lot of times, I'd say 80% of the times we choose how we pass, but there are some spirits that come through and say, it really just was an accident. It really wasn't my time. So, and I don't know sometimes if they're just saying that to ease their loved one's pain or if they're actually saying it because it's actually true. And I guess we'll never know, right? Until we get to the other side and we know the things. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Also, too, I do know that when spirits come through, they talk about emotions sometimes, and people are like, well, because they do keep their same personality, and sometimes they will share emotion with me, like, and not disappointment, because they're not disappointed in anybody and they don't judge, but sometimes they do show a little bit of disappointment in themselves. But here's the thing that I want you to realize too. They see, when they go over and they see their life review, they see it with a different kind of perspective. They're not hard on themselves. They're not judging themselves. They see the whole picture. They see why they did some of the things they did. They see why people did the things to them that they did. And there's a whole big understanding, a more of knowing and understanding than there is scaredness or emotion. So when we are on earth, because everything's a frequency in a radio station, right? Everything's energy. So when we're on Earth, our energy, our emotions are at a level 10. Like they're dialed up to level 10 on the radio. The volume is like 10. That's why on Earth sometimes our emotions are so hard to deal with, because that's one of the things we're here to experience is emotions. But on the other side, or at the frequency that the spirits are at, the volume's down to a 2. They're not overwhelmed with emotion. They're not like they just want to experience it with us or explain to us what they, and you have to remember, they have to explain these situations to us in a language we understand. So when they're sharing these emotions, they're not actually like completely feeling them. It's just that's the only way they know how to explain it. And when they feel these emotions, it's only like at a level 2. It's not, maybe even a 1. It's not even like they're consumed with it or they're worried about it. So if the spirit comes through and says, I'm sorry, they are feeling regret and sorrow, but not in a way that we do on Earth. They're not like rehashing it because they heal over there and they process that over there and they're processing that over there. And sometimes they can choose to wait to process it. If it's really traumatic, they can be like, I don't want to process this yet. I want to wait for a minute, because there's no time over there. Time on the other side is not linear like it is for us. We are the ones who created time. It's all incumbent. So to them, it's hard to explain, but it's like if they want to wait to process something, they can, because they have all the time that they need to do that. So when spirits come through and say they feel sorrow, or they feel like sorry, or they have regret, which they very seldom have regret, but sometimes they do, because they see how they treated people on Earth, and sometimes they don't love the way they treated people on Earth because they see how it had that chain reaction. And so that, though, is at a volume 2 emotion. So when your spirits come through, when they come through and say, yes, I do kind of, or sometimes they don't like to talk about how they passed, because especially if they took their own life, because they're not like super, they kind of seem a little bit embarrassed. But here's the thing, they're not embarrassed at a level 10. They're maybe embarrassed at a level 2, saying, maybe that shouldn't have happened. Maybe I shouldn't have done that because I didn't understand Earth very well, or I couldn't see past the veil, or I had more fear than I should have, or I didn't understand the whole thing. And sometimes, drugs take a huge effect. Sometimes that alters your decision, alters their decisions, and sometimes they have remorse about that. A lot of addictions come through with lots of remorse and sorrowfulness, but they're not holding on to it like it's not consuming them. It's just at a level 2, and they're saying they're sorry because they're processing it. So because when you process it on Earth, it helps you process it, and then that just gets it that much more closure before you get to the other side too. And sometimes there are just things that sometimes spirits just come through and say, this isn't going to be worked out on Earth. This is going to be something that needs to be worked out on the other side, because forgiveness is hard, and sometimes there's just things on Earth that you have a hard time forgiving, and that's okay. I know everybody's like, oh, you got to forgive. As long as it's not consuming you, and as long as you have tried to process it, you can move on, then sometimes spirits just say that's just going to be something we process on the other side. And that's totally fine too. Again, there is no rules. We think that there are. We think that we're told, oh, you have to forgive, you have to forgive. And, sometimes that's just a really fine line. Forgiveness is really tricky. As long as it's not killing you and you're not the one drinking the poison every day, then you can move on and be healthy, and you've processed it on your own. You don't have to be best friends with the person who caused the trauma. So trauma is a tricky thing. I kind of don't, and spirits coming in and out of the body during the trauma thing, that's something that, that's got to be your own intuition, your own, what you kind of feel about that. That's just what I've experienced in the readings that they've told me, that I thought was kind of interesting, that everybody should know that the spirits can leave the body, come in and out, especially during trauma. And here's another thing too, they tell me a lot. You're here to experience things. A lot of times when I was growing up, I was told it was a test. It was a pass or fail thing. And I continually thought, I am not passing this. There's no way I'm passing this. And now it's just so much better knowing that it's just about experience. It's not about testing. It's not about, did I get this right or did I get this wrong? It's about experiencing these different emotions that we're going through, experiencing joy, experiencing sorrow, experiencing grief, experiencing love. This is what we're here to, experiencing families, experiencing success or failure. All of that stuff is something that we are here to experience because it helps us grow spiritually. There is no growth in just being comfortable. And so, but sometimes we are here just to be comfortable because let's say there is past lives. There is, I do believe in reincarnation, and sometimes some of our lives are a little bit harder and there's a lot of trauma. And so we come to Earth just saying, I want an easy one this time. And we just are comfortable. And so that's why some people just don't have the desire to to grow, to they just want to be simple, and they just want it to be simple, easy peasy, and that's fine because that could be this lifetime. They could have had a very traumatic lifetime in a past experience or a past lifetime. This is why we never judge people, because we never know what they've gone through or what they've really gone through in past life experiences. So um I do know that our loved ones on the other side do try and talk to us all the time. All the time, signs and symbols everywhere. And at first, when they first pass, their spirits are around a little bit more. That's why you feel them a little bit closer right when they pass, because their frequency isn't all the way raised. They get to stay and make sure that their loved ones are okay and that they're processing it okay. That's why sometimes afterwards, right after a death, you can feel them around quite a bit, and then more time passes and you feel like they're more distant. It's just that they're raising their frequency constantly and they're growing constantly. And so sometimes it might be harder because it's all about frequency and energy, but they're still always around. And I know that some mediums think that they need permission to come see us, or they need permission, or they're doing, which I've never experienced that. I've always been told they're with us always. They always kind of say, they're just a thought away. It's because once you think about them, you're tuning into their frequency. But other mediums think that sometimes that holds them back. And I've never had that experience. They've never told me that they're getting held back. They tell me that they are a frequency and they can be 10% with one person, 10% with another person, 20% with the one person who needs them the most. I've never had any issues with, I have had spirits that are hard to communicate with, but I've never had issues where they don't show up for somebody, or I did have one time, but it was because she was a medium and they didn't want to really go through me. So I don't know what that, they've never told me anything about needing permission. They just tell me that you talk to them out loud or you think about them, and it's like tuning in their frequency, and they're right there. Because to me, they've told me that they can tune in their frequency and be there for you, but also be somewhere else, because you can have 2% of their frequency while 90% of their frequency is somewhere else. This is why they love family get-togethers, because when everybody's there, they can just hone in their frequency. So when you have big family get-togethers, just be aware of what's going on. Watch for the signs and symbols. And when I talk about signs and symbols, I'm talking about animals acting weird, butterflies, birds, electricity going off and on, lights turning off, appliances being played with, any kind of that stuff. And they can do that anytime, but when you're all together, it's kind of more prominent just because that they can focus their frequency there. And I've had spirits tell me that they sit on the porch with their loved one every morning when they have their cup of coffee. So to me, I don't feel like, I'm sure that on the other side, they're over there processing things and they're going through some things. But I feel like if my dad can't be around, either my grandpa shows up for him, or I just don't ever feel like I'm ever just left alone. I feel like they're always there. And there are times when I'll be like, hey, Dad, I haven't felt you around very much. And then like the next day, he's like sign after sign after sign. I see moose everywhere. So, because here's the thing. They're eternal. They're eternal, right? We are eternal. Our souls are eternal. We are eternal. And there are things that they can't get involved in our life because we have chose to experience them. But if you were to pass over tomorrow, what would you want to do? You would want to visit the loved ones on the other side, but you would also want to be here with your friends and family, helping them and helping them on earth, knowing that you could help them, knowing that you could make, as long as you didn't mess with their free agency, help them to grow and help them to be there for them. That's what we do here on earth. That's what I just don't understand why we wouldn't be able to continue to do that, or why we would need permission to do that. So for me, I've never had any spirits say I need permission to do that. So that's not, if I do ever have a spirit tell me that, I'll let you know. I'll get on here and I'll be like, hey, somebody told me they didn't. Now, there have been like lower frequencies that my spirit guides have not allowed to come through. I've had experiences like that. But other than, and a lot of people get nervous because they do go to readings and they're afraid their loved one's not going to come through. And sometimes their loved ones, the ones that they want to talk to, don't. And that's because usually the ones who do show up are louder than that spirit. I've only had a couple where because you have to remember, spirit tells you what you need. And at the beginning, I did, like, if a spirit came through, I would focus on that one spirit the whole time and not see if there were other spirits that wanted to come through, and that was my mistake. So just know too how seasoned the medium is, or and I hate to say that too, because every medium needs practice, or every medium needs that growth. And I don't want you to judge a medium on if whether or not your loved ones come through, because sometimes if your grandfather is louder than your dad, because my dad was pretty quiet, my grandma was very loud. So a lot of times my grandma will be the first one to come through because she's louder than. So if you ever go to a group reading, always ask your loudest spirit to come through. And then sometimes the medium will just focus on the grandma. And obviously my dad would just probably sit in the background and just be like, hey, I'm kind of here, and not say anything. So don't think that your loved ones don't show up if you go to a reading, because I know that some people get nervous about that. It could really just be that they are just keeping their same personality and they're kind of quiet, because sometimes when I do readings, it is really hard for the more quiet ones. It's like pulling teeth. I'll be like, there's a spirit here, but they just want you to know they're here, but they don't really want to talk. And that's kind of hard too, but that's just how they are. That's just how it is sometimes. So just watch for the communication with them. When they first pass, they do use electronics and dimes and birds and butterflies and feathers and heart-shaped rocks and things like that. The reason why they use those things is because those things are easy to manipulate. Those things are easy for them to move, pennies, things like that. But as time goes on and as they've been over there longer, they can use other things. Like now, my dad used moose. My anytime I see a moose or anything like that, if you guys know me, moose is like my thing. So just know that they're always trying to talk to you. Signs and symbols are huge. And I honestly would just say, to be honest, if you see like a bird and he's acting weird, just kind of check your environment. What are you going through? Are you going through a hard time right now? Were you thinking about your grandfather or your grandmother? Kind of check your environment, trust your gut. And 90% of the time, it's going to be somebody that's on the other side trying to reach you. Just go with that, because honestly, our family's always going to be there for us. They're eternal. So are we. So just, yeah. So I just feel like they're going to be with us all the time, and that's what they kind of tell us. I mean, and that's the thing too. They don't watch you take showers. They don't watch you do intimate things. They're not into that stuff. They're just there to be with you and guide you and help you grow. And so, speaking of that, some mediums think that the more you grieve or the more you're in sorrow, the more you're holding them back. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but I do know that they do. This is a tricky one, because grief is real, and grief is no joke, and grief is so hard, and it hits you like waves. You can really be okay one day, and then just like it can knock you down flat on your butt the next day, or a trigger, just a song or something will come through, and you can just, all the emotions just come right back up. That doesn't mean sometimes you're not holding that spirit back when you grieve for them. They understand it and they get it, but they don't want it to stop you from living your life. A lot of people feel guilty when they do become happy, or when they do start to date again, or when they do find love again, or when they do move on. Or the first time, I remember the first time I laughed after my dad passed. I felt so guilty. I felt so guilty that I was happy after my dad had passed. And then I realized that's what he would want. He wants me to be happy. Our loved ones want us to be happy. They want us to grow. They want us to have these experiences that we said we were going to have. And the thing is that's so hard is they don't really miss us because they're with us. They can still be with us whenever they want. We're just a thought away. But we are the ones who are going through the pain and the grief because we miss them. We can't see them. And sometimes, these feathers and these dimes, they just don't cut it. They just don't cut the emotional, the hurt and the pain. And the arms, like my dad's arms just around me, like hugging me. And so they know and they understand our grief. What they don't want us to do is stop it from helping us live our lives. They don't want us to be so depressed and so missing them so much that we can't move forward. And I do kind of feel like, and I don't want to put any pressure on anybody because that's not what I mean, but I do kind of feel like if we're constantly grieving or constantly in depression, I feel like the Spirit will try and help us so much that it can. I don't want to say that because I don't know that for sure. I don't know that for sure. That's just what some mediums say. I don't ever want you to feel like you're hindering their growth by grieving because grieving is a natural process and it's something you're supposed to do. But I do want you to know they love it when you're happy. They do love it when you find happiness, or they do love it when you grow and when you're growing spiritually, and they do love it when you hear them. So when you do see the signs and the symbols, acknowledge it and say, I know you're there, because they love that. And it's like a game. Then you'll continue to keep playing it all the time. So that's what I know. That's what from my experience and the readings that I have, this has been the general consensus. Few times have spirits come through and said something different, but it's cool that some spirits, maybe out of a bazillion. Gosh, I was trying to figure out how many readings I've done in my lifetime. I think it's over like 6,000 or 7,000 hours of readings. I do feel like there is that one exception because we can't control everything, not even on the other side. There's always that. Even spirits say they can't, being a psychic is really hard for future stuff because our emotions are so crazy that they can never guarantee what we're going to decide. They can pretty much think, okay, I think they're going to go this direction, but at the end of the day, especially with relationships, people can decide things on a whim out of the blue, and it can change the whole trajectory of things. So it's kind of, there is a plan, but sometimes there's always leniency in the plan. And I think that that's why spirits can come through once in a while and say something different from what the majority say, because there's always that little tiny bit of leeway. So nothing's ever set in stone, and just go with your gut. If you feel like, if you feel like the bird that's sitting on the window is your grandfather, it probably is. 90% of the chance it is. If you feel like that your loved one wasn't supposed to leave yet and it was taken too early, then that was probably the case. But it doesn't make it, but it can't change it, is the thing. So they do want us to, at the end of the day, they are with us to help us to be happy and to find joy. And it's not, it's really just trying to live with the love that they left us, right? And they want us to move on in that way. They don't want you to forget them. That's not, but they want you to be able to move forward without them. It's so hard. That's what grief is, and that's why grief is so complicated. So those are the things, just the general things that come through in all the readings, and like I always say, you take what resonates with you, because I could have interpreted some of this wrong. And so you find out for yourself. You have a spiritual experience. You ask your loved one. You pray about it. You have that experience, because a spiritual experience is something you have, not something somebody else tells you or gives you. So there you go, you guys. I love you so much. And I will not see you next week because I will be off, but I will see you the week after that, and then in September we'll start the regular programming again. And I love you so much. If you guys do feel like you're going through awakening, though, I do have an awakening course on my website, and it talks about the chakras, the protection. It has 8 different your guides, talking to your loved ones, signs and symbols, all of that stuff. So if you feel like you're kind of just starting this journey, you can go to my website, and it's a course that goes to your email every week. You have access to it, and every week's a different subject, and there's homework, and it's actually kind of cool. So I love you guys, and remember always, like always, you are the magic.